I think most of us agree that we are overworked in a lot of outdated systems. And I think that most of us can see this line of understanding that we need to slow down and stop having so much resistance towards what is, and planning for, the future and making the life that we want. I spoke a little bit about my story, how I started training dogs a year or two ago in a short little clip. And I just recently watched a video from Gooby. I think his name is Gooby. I'm sure that's not his, I don't know, Gooby and Doobie. Just randomly popped up on my YouTube feed, and it was 40 minutes long, and I watched the whole thing, and it was about a neurosurgeon who spent quite a bit of his life learning neurosurgery and then realizing that was not quite what he wanted to do. And it reached a lot of people, and I was thinking about something that I've been contemplating for quite some time. I have a different story, but somewhat similar, where I was a teacher, and then I realized that was not quite what I wanted, and I became a dog trainer. And I'm going to talk about that in this video in a little bit more detail. But the other piece is something that has bothered me since I was a kid. And I know that I'm not the only person who thinks this way. In the church where I grew up, people would have what they call open mic, where people would go down to the front and they would share thoughts or experiences. And I remember even as a kid hearing these things that people would share, and they almost always followed the same general framework, which was basically, I once was lost, I was a sinner, I was terrible, and something happened, and now I'm found and I'm saved. Very summarized, obviously. And I remember thinking, why are all these people always saying, like, I figured it all out and now I'm on the other side? And that made me feel like I was lacking, because I constantly felt like I was in the thick of it. Life. And I think I have a lot of thoughts on this, but I think a big overall theme is because we have, in our current culture and society, is very about winning and losing, is about you're here now, you're getting to there. This is right or it's wrong. It's black or it's white. And it's at the expense of right now how you're being. It steals presence away from the only thing that exists, which is now, which technically is a whole conversation of itself. Is it now, or is it that I thought about this a second after, the neurons fired, and then I said now, which is a whole, by the time it reached your ears, it's gone. I'm not going to nerd out on you too much, but and I've been, for the past 2-ish years, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less, I've been in a little bit of a funk. And this video that I just watched just clarified a couple of little things for me. But the reason I'm sharing this is because I specifically want to share something that doesn't have an answer, that doesn't have a pretty little bow and a perfect little package. And I went through this and now I'm on the other side. I want to share this because I'm here. I'm in the thick of it. I don't know. I really don't know what my future looks like. And that's hard to be in that state of mind. And these past 2, even more than that, 3-ish years, I think my being has been showing me, screaming at me, there's more, and I don't know what that looks like exactly. I will quickly mention that, again, over the past couple of years, I've experienced what I, for at least for me, I would consider depression, for lack of a better word. Not every single day I was still able to function, but I would just be, going about my day, and then all of a sudden I would just be absolutely demolished by a wave of sadness and or loneliness. I am currently single, and I've been going through a lot of mental and emotional stuff that I'm learning about me. But I just want to share this because I think that most of us are in the thick of it. And most of us feel inadequate to do almost anything, I think, because there are professionals in every single industry, it seems like, and they always seem like, especially on social media, they always seem like they're the greatest and the best. And short little highlight reels. And, even for me, what I do with my business, I do quite a bit of that. And it's very, for a while, it's been more unfulfilling than it ever initially was, because I think I'm starting to realize that's not real life. That's not how most training actually is. Most people won't sit and listen to this whole thing, and that's okay. I am doing this currently because even if it gets to the one person who potentially could benefit from it, that'd be great. And if not, I'm still getting it out because I feel called to do this. So I would consider myself a recovering people pleaser, is what I say. My instinctive response to any kind of issue is fawning or appeasing. Let me make you feel better. How can I fix this situation so you feel better? Because I can't, I don't know how to handle that, and I want you to feel good. But that becomes at the expense of my own feelings and my thoughts. And one of my big goals in life is to grow and to be as authentic as I possibly can. And that's going to be very messy sometimes. But I struggle with confrontation. I've gotten significantly better at it because I've had ample opportunities to practice, but I still don't like it at all. At all. I don't like it. But I've been through each of the trauma responses. Regardless, this I don't really understand all of it, but I'm just going to share my story and again reiterate that I have learned so much and I'm very grateful for a lot of it, and I don't have all the answers. So if you're looking for a nice tidy little bow at the end of this, it's not going to be like that. It's going to be something different. So I am the youngest of 8 kids, and my mom had 2 miscarriages right before me. Why she wanted to have an 8th child is a whole I've talked to her quite a bit about it, and it's pretty cool. I think it's pretty cool, but she just basically said that she felt like she needed to have one more. I was like, 8 children, mom. And she said that her original plan was never even to have that many kids. But with that, it was amazing. And I I believe that I had a wonderful childhood, absolutely wonderful childhood. I lived outside. I grew up in nature with animals. Um, and as the youngest of 8, my siblings all moved out and got married, had kids, all this good stuff. And these past couple of years, I have been realizing the time period where I was basically alone with very few people in my life was basically like 11, 12, 13, 14-ish. It's very, I think 15-ish, very pivotal time when you're going basically from a kid to an adult. And I'd matured late for sure in a lot of ways, but my mom is wonderful. My dad was very sweet and kind. Um, and basically all my friends moved right before then. My family moved, and I was in a church that was basically my whole life. Those were the only friends that I had, and some of those friends lived in my neighborhood, but some of them moved. And all of this, I think, just led to this a little bit hyper independence, and also just like forced comfort of being alone, kind of, and creativity. And I'm so grateful for so much of it, and I am not blaming any person. It was an incredible experience. And now I'm starting to realize a little bit more just the significance of how that impacted me. And I get to go through all that and learn from it. And it's very interesting. When I was 15 years old, I got my first job, and I was working with kids in an after school program. And I needed money basically to pay for gas in the car that my parents let me use, and pay for my cell phone bill. Before that, I would cut the grass and, do watch the neighbors' dogs and stuff like that to get income for that. And I realized that I basically spent the next, I don't even know, years, my whole entire life. I've been working since that time. I'm going to kind of fast forward a little bit, but I basically, at one particular time, I think I had 4 jobs simultaneous, and then 3 jobs. That didn't last very long, obviously. Then 3 jobs simultaneous. And so I was constantly doing a lot in order to make ends meet. Yeah. So the common theme, I worked in a whole bunch of different things, but the common theme was that I was good with kids. I worked with kids and quite a bit. And I could always relate to them, they're just their little imaginations, their energy, their aliveness just now. And so I basically originally went to school for American Sign Language because I was like, I'm a visual learner. I can learn this. And it was really cool because that gave me a very good, solid understanding of a lot. Actually, linguistics just in general is a fascinating sociological component of just understanding the human condition and culture, and just it's incredible. I went through some stuff and broke up with my basically first long-term boyfriend and everything. And I realized that I didn't want to live on the East Coast. I grew up in the East Coast. I just, the cold is hard. The cold is very hard, guys. It's a lot. The winter before I moved, I had a job at a school and then an afternoon job at a little horse ranch thingy. A couple of horses, like 6 horses. Man, I got stories about that. I had some pretty incredible stories there, but the winter before I moved, I was wearing all of my winter gear and I had these thick gloves on, and I was trying to put some hay into a net with this little metal carabiner, and I couldn't open the carabiner. My thick gloves, and I kept trying, and I'm like, I take the gloves off, and it's freezing cold outside, and I'm realizing I can't move my fingers. I can't move them very well because it's freezing, regardless of whether the gloves are on or off, and you need them off to be able to do this. And it's 15 below zero. It's disgusting. And anyways, I basically decided I need to freaking, I love the sunshine. I know that is a big aspect of my life. So I ended up thankfully having a sister out in California with her family, and she was super gracious and lovely, and said that she would allow me to live with her. I had Rain, my dog, live with her basically just, free of charge for a couple of months until I, got on my feet. And, after that, my breakup, I called her up. I'm like, were you serious about that? And she said, yeah, absolutely. And I packed my bags, and my mom drove with me, which was cool. Drove cross country, and I moved out to California, and the sun has significantly helped a lot of aspects of my life. In California, I got a whole new perspective on life for a little while because, new environment, sunshine, beach, water, just like early 20s or mid 20s or something like that. And and then I I have so many stories. I was in another relationship, and he was encouraging me to go back to school. And so I was like, you know what? That's okay. I'm going to do that. So I went and got my master's online for special education. And I'm pausing right now because part of it was not a very good relationship. I didn't understand at the time, but it was a lot, and I basically thought I was stuck in it because I didn't have enough of an income at the time to live by myself. And when I decided to go back to school, student loans, and I was working also full time, I think. But I am pausing because for that year that I was in school, I was going to be working full time and going to school, and I knew I just wouldn't have any time for Rain, and I basically sent her home carefully to go live with the guy that I got her with, and I still kind of feel bad about that. Yeah, but I thought that I was doing the right thing. And she's okay. She's laying right next to me right now. Regardless, I I finished my master's. Before I finished my master's, I had been working at a whole bunch of different schools, again, different schools. And when I was doing my internship, I found the most amazing school that I've ever worked in. Worked in quite a few schools at this point. And it was basically, I don't know what it's called, but basically it was a combination of private and public, and had the most amazing teachers, awesome students. They were students with moderate to severe needs. And it was really awesome because the school had pretty much a one student or student teacher to student ratio. If I said that right, you understand. Which was amazing. And a lot of these kids were a lot. Wonderful kids. So as I was finishing up my master's degree, I had taken out student loans. I thankfully had gotten out of that relationship, the previous one, the not good one, into a better relationship. And yet still was living with a guy and sharing expenses and everything. And I finished, as I was finishing my degree, and working at the school, I was thinking, cool, end is in sight. If I go work, the next 10 years full-time as a teacher, I'll get my student loans canceled, because that's supposedly what California does. And I found an awesome school, awesome teachers, great people to learn from. I had, I think, at least 2 different guaranteed jobs. I had another place that was trying to offer to pay for me to go get my BCBA. That was way too much paperwork. I at least decided I didn't want to do that. But this school also was like, will basically hire you as a teacher and everything when you're done. And I had at least 2 different, I had so many things in this short period of time at this school. I had at least 2 different emotional breakdowns on the job that I've never experienced that before, like while I was around other people and stuff like that, where I just, I guess you consider it a panic attack. I don't know, a panic attack or something, emotional, I don't know, where just some little, a student was having a hard time and doing the thing, and I just suddenly was like over the top overwhelmed. And I remember one particular time I, called another person over to make sure the student was okay, and I had to go into just a little private teacher room, and I couldn't stop crying for like 30 minutes. Like I couldn't stop. And they're like, "Are you okay? What happened?" I'm like, "I'm fine." And that happened basically twice, along with some seemingly sudden random physical things. And I was like, what is going on? What's happening? Why am I struggling so much with this? Why am I I should be happy. I should be excited that I'm done with school and I get to do this and they're going to pay me. And then one day, a student was acting out. They were basically escalating. And we have these things called de-escalation plans for each individual student. Sometimes they're just having, too much going on. And so we'll have specific little steps like, okay, touch your nose, clap your hands, stick out your tongue, or connect the blue. We'll have a little thing. We'll say, connect the blue thing to the blue thing on the thing, whatever, to kind of snap them out of their, their state. And for each student, it looked a little bit different, right? And this one particular student, just absolutely nothing was working. They had to go hands-on the student because, which we were also trained because they were potentially going to hurt other people as well as themselves. And they were, having a moment, more than a moment. And I remember the teacher that I was just under, who was a freaking wonderful human being. I just adore her. I remember her looking at another teacher, and she had this like gleam in her eye, not because the student was escalating. That was very common. Like that just happened. But she's like, all right. She looks at the other teacher. We're going to have to come up with a new escalation plan. And I'm sure part of that was like, oh, yay. But there was also a note of genuine passion for what she did for a living. And in that moment, I saw that like spark in her eye, like my heart just sank like a rock. And it was in that moment that I suddenly realized that is a look that I'm not going to ever have for this job or teaching. And it sank because now I'm in quite a bit more debt than I was before. I have this degree. It doesn't mean anything. And debt, I don't have a way to provide for myself. I had next to no savings. It was a lot. It was a lot. And granted, as a reminder, I have again worked since I was 15 years old. And throughout my whole time probably living in California, I was still not able to save hardly anything. And I still finished my degree because I think that at that time it was like a couple weeks left or something. Obviously, like I finished it. And I gave them my notice. I did go for one final little thing where I was like, well, maybe teaching online is going to be a little bit better. Maybe it will be, I don't know. I did that for a couple of months before COVID, mind you. And it was horrible. I am not a technologically savvy person. I barely knew any of my students, and I did that for a very short time period. I was like, this is the official closing of the door. And I struggled because I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't know what I could do. I needed to make money. I had almost no savings. Like when I say almost no savings, I think I maybe had $2,000 maybe. And I needed to, my rent split with the guy was $700 a month. Meaning I had like 2 months worth of not working, if that. And so I was like, cool. But I made a decision that I just refused to do something for the majority of my life that I was not going to be passionate about. So, I had gotten a couple of basically random jobs throughout the next couple of months that were, well, before this. I thought about it and I thought about it, and there's two general things that I was pretty good at and that I liked, and that was art and writing, actually, art and writing, but animals. I knew that I loved animals, and I was always, from a little child, anything with animals, to lizards out there. Like I've glanced over there several different times. There's definitely lizards. I'm just like instantly captivated by like, what are they doing? I would watch ants as a child, like even as an adult. Actually, I find it very meditative right now. But anyways, I knew animals. No idea what I could do to make a living with animals. I had no idea, especially with no experience on paper. So I had gotten like a couple of little odd jobs sort of related to animals. I ended up finding a dog walking job that happened basically right over COVID. And that's also a whole story in and of itself. It's the first time and last time that I was ever illegally fired, or fired, period. It was illegal. She should not have done that, but I'm very glad that she did. I was actually hoping she would. Fun fact, I found out later, the real reason why she did this was because at least what I was told later by the one other employee, was that I wanted to know more, and I was too curious, which is another thing I've been told most of my life. You think too much, which I do sometimes. So I had this job for a short period. COVID happened. I basically got illegally fired, and I was like, awesome. COVID was one of the best things ever for me because I actually was able to save a little bit of money for the first time in my life. A little bit of money. Basically because of this general situation in COVID. And so I decided to go and start my own dog walking business. So I started that, and very, very shortly in, I was getting people asking dog related like training questions. And I'm like, why are you asking me? I'm just a dog walker. And so I was very upfront and honest with people. I'm like, well, I don't really have that much experience training dogs other than, my dog. At that point I had Rain back, by the way. And so I was like, well, I'm curious about this. So I decided to try to go learn. And I was like, well, what I could probably do is learn in some of my free time. Maybe I can go intern somewhere. I found an ad on Instagram that popped up, which is funny because I don't think I'd ever seen any ads on Instagram at that particular time. Or at least I don't remember. And it was for an internship for a dog related thing. And it was with protection dogs and board and train dogs. And I was like, cool, bet. So I reached out to them and they said yes. I have a ridiculous amount of stories from that whole experience that I also won't get into here, but extraordinarily summarized, it was a phenomenal opportunity that I'm beyond grateful for even to this day. And I got, in my second day that I was there, I met the owner at in town because he was bringing a bunch of dogs to go do some proofing. And we worked the dogs in town, and then on the drive back, he looks at me and he basically offered me to take over their company here because they were moving several states away. And I laughed initially. I was like, how do you know I'm not like a murderer or something? But long story longer, I basically ended up doing that. And so I got a huge jump start into dog training, into running business, into trying to manage people, into kennel stuff, into understanding the politics, the rules, how to run a business, so many different things. It was very overwhelming, but it was also incredible. With that, of course, like I said, a lot of stuff happened. And then I decided, because certain things were not lining up with the way I wanted to run things or how I wanted to be, my employees as well. And so I decided to go and start my own thing. Which is funny because that was actually one of their original suggestions as things were kind of winding down. And so anyways, I did that. It was pretty incredible because as soon as I did that, actually right before I even started to do that, some pretty crazy things started happening. So I, again, that other relationship was done. I moved into the most wonderful little house I've never been able to afford or manage or maintain a little house by myself, any house. I always lived like in apartments out here. That was the first time. And it was one of the most magical experiences I ever had because things started to happen that I couldn't explain. I basically decided through this whole process to let go of the world's expectations of me and to follow my intuition and my gut and my heart, even though I had no idea where these things would lead. And through this process, I got to see the most beautiful things that I've ever experienced before. It was like you live your whole life thinking in such a way that becomes so constricting, like there are bars within your line of sight and your vision and you can't see anything. And then one day you just say, I don't need to be behind these bars, and you just push them out of the way. And there's still just blackness in front of you and you have no idea where you are, but you're not pushing up against or holding up these weights, these bars of other people's expectations. And you say, I don't know what's out in this darkness, but I can feel there's something great there. And you start just taking a step and then another step and then another step. And before you know it, all of a sudden you start to see this little brightening just in front of you where you can see where your next step is going to be. And then that light brightens a little more and then a little more. And then all of a sudden there's this door and it opens. And there's this whole world through this door. And then you continue going down the path and there's another door and it opens and there's a whole other world. And again, that house, it's a whole story, but I basically found this. I needed to be out of where I lived before within basically a 2-week time frame. And I found this house. I got allowed to be in this house, and they knew that I was going to have potentially 8 dogs at a time in this house and had a giant backyard, and I could afford it, like barely, but I could afford it. And and I want this house still. I still want this house. It's perfect. And I started getting clients, people who would find me from the reviews from the previous company and they would go and find my name, and then they found out that I had my own business, and they would find me, or they would tell people that used to train there, and they would find me. And in addition to that, within a couple of months, actually right away, I started to put out specific content on Instagram that previously I had been told, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. Don't give away free information. And I was like, I'm going to give away free information. And my Instagram just blew up. Like literally blew up within January, February, March, April. No, January, February, March. Within 3 months of me starting my business, and continued to just explode, which brought in more clients. And then one day I get a call from this person who I'd been following for years, who basically had a prison program where they would take dogs that were on death row and they would go match them up with inmates who were, in there potentially for life. And then they would transform both of these humans and dogs' lives with understanding that common peace within each other. And it was incredible. And then they were talking, then I talked to the owner at the time, who had founded all this stuff. And I was like, you don't understand, like maybe you hear this all the time, but I don't care about celebrities. I don't care about artists. That's cool, but I just don't really care that much about that. I like good music, but you are someone that I respect you so much for what you have been able to offer so many people. And he was talking about how they were gonna working on establishing a program here, and that I could potentially be, one of the trainers here in San Diego. And I ended up being able to go up there and meet them and go to a couple of the prisons and get experience it. And just door after door was opening and opening. And I was like so overwhelmed with gratitude. And I share all this because I want to, but because that lasted probably a year, 2-ish years. And I ended up having to move to this place. And this was also incredible. And I had a couple other really cool things happen. But it changed, right? So I had this beautiful experience being who I wanted to be and doing what I wanted to do. And very recently, again, I say these past 3-ish years or so, I started to feel some unrest. And I didn't know what it was. And then I kept going through some more stuff, and I was in another relationship. I've been around the block, I guess. And I thought for a little while part of it was due to that. And I do think quite a bit was due to that. We were not quite aligned in the way that I originally thought we were. And so we ended that. But this unrest continued. In fact, got quite a bit more intense for the next year, because for the first time in my life, I started to experience actual loneliness. I really enjoy being alone. But as you get into your, I guess, 30s, mid-30s, you start to realize you want to share life with your person. And so that was a whole aspect that I had never really dealt with before. But I've been going through a lot of internal things where I am realizing and have continued to realize that I am not quite where I would like to be. And I've contemplated quite a bit that, well, I should be happy. There's nothing really wrong. I'm, on one hand, making more money than I've ever made, but I'm also not saving anything at this point because, again, this house is more expensive, and everything that I'm making is going to my bills and student loans and life. And so that is one aspect that I'm dealing with. But in my opinion, the deeper level is addressing a couple of things. I realize that a job is still a job, and regardless of whatever you do, it's still going to be a job at some point, and so you're still going to need to do the things, and you're not always going to love it, and that's fine. I would say that I have since pretty much mostly come out of that depression. Not completely. I still have moments that I just am suddenly overwhelmed, just overwhelmed by taking care of myself and the dogs and yeah. But it's gotten significantly better. But the part that I want to share with this, and I'm going to wrapping this up, is I don't know what this next piece looks like. The one thing that stood out to me the most from this particular video from, again, Doobie and Gooby, one of those things. Thank you, by the way. This was just incredible. If this guy happens to watch at some point one day, maybe, is one of the things that he said that stuck with him throughout his career was that as a surgeon, basically, the thing that a surgeon should be doing is basically making people easing their stress and their pain. And throughout his journey, he basically was realizing that his specific job could temporarily help ease certain people's pain, but unless they were addressing the root causes, which were basically health, mental health, physical health, diet, and all that stuff, then they would just get re-injured basically and have to have another surgery and then another surgery and another surgery. And so he was finding that he wasn't as fulfilled in what he was doing. And that clicked something for me literally today, which is why I'm recording this right now, which is with what I do. I train dogs and I also train people. But I think part of the thing that I've been struggling with without realizing it is that with a lot of my clients, I'm very honest. If I'm doing a board and train, I'm constantly telling them, hey, it's still going to take a lot of work for you. It's going to be difficult. It's going to be challenging. I don't want you to spend money on this board and train unless you are willing to continue to do work afterwards as well and adjust and integrate what I am teaching you. And I realized that I'm still taking dogs oftentimes with problems, and I am learning them as best I can. I'm adjusting as best I can for them. I'm in communication with the owners. I'm honest about everything. But it still is not always addressing the root problem. It still is adjusting behaviors for sure, and teaching behaviors for sure. But oftentimes the root problem is that these dogs, especially people who are getting working breed dogs, without necessarily the understanding of the fact that they're working breed dogs, is that these dogs need fulfillment. And that's a lifestyle change for the person, for somebody who, decides to go and get a Malinois or something. And so anyways, that just very literally, like I said today, clicked with me. So I think that one of the things that I'm going to be doing, at least in regards to business specifically, is working to help teach people more of how to integrate more fulfillment into the lives of their dogs, because oftentimes just the fulfillment itself helps to significantly reduce the unwanted behaviors. I'll still be teaching behaviors because it's very important and you can use that, but I think that I'm going to try to kind of transition a little bit from my mental aspect. But the other aspect too is, again, I'm going to quickly say this, is like I said, I've been going through this whole process for the past several years. And Malinois just sighed. And this past year, I've just been saying to myself, I don't know where I want my business to go. I don't know what that looks like. I also want my own, fulfillment in my day to day. I also understand I have to do work, but I don't know how to get to what it is that I want to feel. So, without further ado, I am going to post this on both my channels, my Aligned Canine channel and then my Aligned Being channel that I just started. And if this is remotely interesting to you, obviously this is very long, I would love it if you would follow my Aligned Being channel, just for traction. And again, if you're interested, and please provide any comments or whatever. But I'm planning on being more genuine in the moment and authentic, and sharing little lessons that I am learning and have been learning, and kind of document this process of figuring out what it is that I want next and what that looks like. So if you've made it this far, thanks. You're freaking awesome. Please feel free to say whatever. Like I said, I gotta go pee, so I'm gonna wrap this up. But yeah, hope this has been able to, I don't know, help even one person. Regardless, I'm gonna post it because I've been putting stuff off, and even though I don't know what this is supposed to look like, I'm going to go for it anyways. So feel free to join me if you want to watch some, I don't know, random thoughts and philosophy on life, and a little bit of science nerdiness in there. And a little bit of a probably neurodivergent whatever I am. So, all right, guys, take care. Thank you.